8 years ago, I would lie in bed at night and listen to my knees. Not because I wanted to, because they wouldn't let me sleep. There was this deep, grinding ache that started somewhere behind the kneecap and spread down into my shins and up into my hips. And I'd just stare at the ceiling thinking, well, this is what 84 feels like. This is just age. This is the price you pay for living long enough to see your grandchildren grow up. I told myself that every single night for almost 2 years. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I think a lot of people do exactly what I did. They hear the warning and they call it something else. I am 92 years old. I sleep through the night like a child does, deep and quiet and without waking. I take 0 prescription medications for my joints. 0. And I want to tell you how that happened, because it did not happen by accident. And it did not happen because I have some special genetics, or because I was lucky. It happened because I finally stopped ignoring what my body had been trying to tell me for years. Let me go back to the beginning. The first sign was not the pain. The first sign was the sound. A soft cracking when I bent down to pick something up off the floor. Most people hear that and laugh it off. Oh, there go my knees again, and they keep moving. I did that too. But looking back, that cracking was my body speaking in a very quiet voice, saying, something is changing in here. Pay attention. The second sign came in the evenings. By around 5 or 6 o'clock, my ankles would be slightly puffy. Not dramatic, not alarming, just a little thick around the bone. My shoes felt tighter. I'd sit down, put my feet up, and by morning it would be gone. So again, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I'd been on my feet too long. Maybe it was the heat. The third sign was the stiffness in the morning. Not pain exactly, just this resistance, like my joints needed a few minutes to remember how to work. I'd sit on the edge of the bed and just wait, breathe, let things loosen up. 10 minutes, sometimes 15. And then I'd be fine, and I'd forget about it until the next morning. Doctors talk about inflammation. They talk about cartilage wear. But what they don't often explain, and this is something I only understood much later, is that these quiet little signs are not random. They are connected. They are all pointing to the same underlying process, and that process does not announce itself loudly at first. It whispers. And then one day, it stops whispering. For me, that day came on a Tuesday in February. I woke up at 2 a.m. with both knees burning, a deep, radiating heat that went straight to the bone. Not a cramp, not a passing twitch, real pain, the kind that makes you hold your breath. I lay there in the dark and thought, this is not age. Something is wrong. I want to explain what I now understand was happening inside those joints. Because once someone explained it to me in simple terms, everything made sense. And I think if more people heard this early enough, they would not wait as long as I did. Think about old pipes in a house. Not new pipes, not the ones in a house built recently, but the old iron pipes that have been carrying water for 50, 60, 70 years. What happens to those pipes over time is not that they break. It's more subtle than that. Mineral deposits and rust and debris slowly build up along the inner walls. The pipe doesn't collapse, it just gets narrower. The water pressure drops, the flow becomes sluggish. And the homeowner doesn't know anything is wrong until one day the faucet barely trickles or something finally gives. Our joints work on a very similar principle. The cartilage, that smooth, slick tissue that allows bones to glide against each other, depends on constant circulation. It depends on synovial fluid moving freely, bringing nutrients in and carrying waste products out. When circulation slows, when inflammatory compounds accumulate, when the fluid becomes thicker and less mobile, the cartilage begins to starve quietly. The bones begin to grind. The lining of the joint becomes irritated, and none of that is visible from the outside until the damage is already significant. What's even more important, and this is the part doctors don't always connect for you, is that the same sluggish circulation affecting your joints is often affecting your blood vessels at the same time. The very vessels that are supposed to deliver oxygen and nutrients to your tissues can become narrowed, stiff, less responsive. Some people call it a silent killer for that reason. You feel fine, you function, and underneath, a slow constriction is happening that affects everything from your energy levels to how well you heal to how deeply you sleep. It is not age, it is accumulation, and accumulation can be addressed. I did not learn this from my doctor. My doctor at the time told me to take ibuprofen and come back if things got worse. What I learned from an old woman in my building who was 79 and moved like she was 55. Her name was Dolores, and she had grown up in a small town in New Mexico and had a collection of remedies her grandmother had used. She sat with me one afternoon in the lobby, and she said, "Maria, you are fighting this from the wrong direction. You are waiting for it to hurt and then reacting. You have to work on it every night before it ever gets the chance to hurt." The first thing she taught me was the compress. It sounds so simple that most people dismiss it immediately, and I understand that. We are conditioned to believe that anything worth doing has to be complicated or expensive or require a prescription. But the compress she described is based on something very real. The idea that the tissues around inflamed joints respond to specific compounds that penetrate through the skin and reach the underlying tissue, warming the blood vessels, encouraging circulation, pulling down the swelling. Here is exactly what I do, and have done, nearly every night for the past 7 years. I take 2 tablespoons of raw apple cider vinegar, the kind with the cloudy sediment at the bottom, not the filtered kind. And I mix it with 1 tablespoon of olive oil, not extra virgin, but regular light olive oil, and 1 teaspoon of ground cayenne pepper. I mix those 3 things in a small bowl until they form a loose paste. Then I take a clean cotton cloth. I use an old tea towel cut into squares, and I soak one side of it thoroughly in the mixture. I press the cloth against both knees, one at a time, starting with whichever one feels worse. I wrap it lightly with a dry cloth on top to hold the warmth and keep it from dripping, and I leave it on for 20 minutes. I do this sitting in my chair with my legs elevated on a small footstool, and I usually do it while listening to something quiet on the radio. The cayenne contains something called capsaicin, which you may have seen in certain topical creams at the pharmacy. What capsaicin does, in simple terms, is signal the small blood vessels near the surface of the skin to dilate, to open wider, more blood flow, more warmth, more circulation reaching into those joint tissues that have been sitting stiff all day. The apple cider vinegar has an acidic quality that appears to help with inflammation at the tissue level. I cannot explain the chemistry of it, only that Dolores explained it to me, and that the research I have since read supports the idea. The olive oil helps the mixture penetrate rather than just sit on the surface of the skin. After 8 or 10 nights of this, I noticed I was waking up less. After 3 weeks, the night pain was almost entirely gone. But Dolores told me the compress alone was not enough. The joints also need movement, not aggressive movement, not the kind of exercise someone my age cannot safely do. Gentle, deliberate movement that tells the fluid inside the joint to start circulating, tells the supporting muscles and tendons to stay active and capable. She showed me 3 movements, and I still do all of them every morning before I get out of bed and every evening before I apply the compress. The first one, lying flat on your back, you bend one knee and slowly draw it up toward your chest. You hold it there with both hands clasped just below the knee, not behind it, below it, and you breathe in deeply. As you exhale, you allow the knee to draw just a fraction closer to your chest without forcing it. You hold that for a slow count of 8. Then you straighten the leg back out along the bed, set it down, and repeat with the other side. You do this 5 times on each leg. You are not trying to stretch aggressively. You are just inviting the joint to move through its range with no weight on it, which is an entirely different and much gentler experience than moving while standing. The second movement, still lying on your back, both legs straight and relaxed. You point your feet down as if you are reaching your toes toward the foot of the bed. Then you flex them back, as if trying to bring your toes toward your face. You alternate this slowly, point and flex, 10 times. This is not about the knee directly. It is about the calf muscles and the circulation in the lower leg, which directly affects the fluid dynamics around the knee. When circulation is sluggish below the knee suffers for it. The third movement, this one I do seated on the edge of the bed. I sit up straight, both feet on the floor. I lift one foot so the leg is extended in front of me, parallel to the ground, and I hold it there for a count of 5. Then I lower it back down, touch the floor, and lift the other side. I alternate 8 times each leg. This is a gentle quadriceps engagement, the large muscle running across the front of the thigh, and that muscle is the primary support structure for the entire knee joint. Keeping it even moderately active changes the pressure distribution on the cartilage completely. A weak quadriceps means the joint itself is bearing impact it was never designed to bear alone. 3 minutes total, morning and evening. That is all of it. But the consistency matters more than the intensity. 7 years without missing more than a handful of days. Now the last piece. And in some ways, this is the piece I believe made the deepest difference over time. Every morning, before I eat anything, before I have my coffee, I drink a glass of warm water, not hot, warm, somewhere around the temperature of a comfortable bath, with the juice of half a lemon squeezed into it and a 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric powder stirred in. Sometimes I add a very small pinch of black pepper, which apparently helps the body absorb the active compound in turmeric far more efficiently. Turmeric is not new. It has been used in cooking and in traditional medicine for centuries. But what has only recently begun to receive serious research attention, and doctors are still slow to bring this into routine conversations with patients, which I find genuinely frustrating, is the effect of its active compound on systemic inflammation. Not inflammation in one joint, systemic inflammation. The low-grade, chronic, body-wide kind that underlies so many of the conditions that arrive quietly in later life. The lemon serves a different but related purpose. Warm lemon water first thing in the morning helps flush what has accumulated overnight in the kidneys, supports gentle liver activity, and begins to alkalinize the body's environment after the natural acidic shift of nighttime metabolism. Again, this is not something my doctor ever mentioned to me. I read about it. I talked to people who had used it for years, and then I tried it. Within the first month, my morning stiffness was noticeably less. Within 3 months, my ankles stopped swelling in the evenings. I am not a doctor. I want to be clear about that. I am a 92-year-old woman who spent too long assuming that deterioration was inevitable, and who eventually found, through other people's knowledge and her own stubbornness, that the body responds when you give it the right conditions. It does not always respond perfectly. It does not reverse decades of wear overnight, but it responds. What I wish someone had told me at 70 or 75 or even 80 is this. The cracking in your knees is a signal. The evening swelling is a signal. The morning stiffness is a signal. None of those things are just age. Age is time passing. Those symptoms are your body telling you that something in its internal environment needs attention, that the pipes, so to speak, need to be cleared. You can wait until the pipes burst, or you can start working on them while they are still just slow. I think about the years I lost to bad sleep and unnecessary pain, and I wonder sometimes how many people are lying awake right now doing exactly what I did, telling themselves, this is just what getting older feels like. And I wonder what they would do differently if someone had sat with them the way Dolores sat with me, quietly, and without judgment, and said, "This doesn't have to be your normal." That is the only reason I am telling you any of this. I am not a young woman with an easy story to sell. I am 92 years old, and I have earned every single thing I know through living it. And what I know is that the body wants to heal. It wants to circulate and restore and function. It just sometimes needs you to stop dismissing the signals and start paying attention. I wonder sometimes, and I say this genuinely, not rhetorically, whether the people who do the best in their later years are the ones with the best medical care, or the ones who learned early to listen to the quiet voice their body uses before it starts to shout. I have watched people with access to every specialist and every medication decline far faster than neighbors of mine who relied on nothing but consistency and old knowledge. I do not think that is a coincidence. But I also know people would argue the other side of that, and I think that argument is worth having. What I know for certain is what happened to me. The numbers don't lie. I am 92. I sleep through the night. I walk without pain. And the only things I changed were a cloth soaked in 3 ingredients, 3 minutes of gentle movement, and a glass of warm water every morning before breakfast. If even one part of this reaches someone who has been telling themselves that the pain is just the price of getting old, then it was worth saying.